see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
What unites people? Armies, gold, flags, stories. There's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story. Nothing can stop it.
If you want to stand out from everybody else, you need to get into storytelling.
Draw a different frame around the same set of circumstances and new pathways come into view.
Welcome to ARTEFACTLive with me, Scott MacArthur, where we look at the art and science of story. We don't care who you are, whether you're a bricklayer, a professor or a speaker, all we care about is you being a good storyteller.
Thank God the drummers arrived.
It's time to realise that facts tell, but it's stories that sell.
Get me some nasty and get it now or someone's getting shot.
And that's a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche of a 1,000 comments.
Selling a hemorrhoid cream to someone who's got hemorrhoids.
Got a whip.
I was born into a deep contradiction.
This stuff's magic.
God, that's so clever.
Good afternoon and welcome to Artefact Live and me, Scott MacArthur. How are you doing? Episode 56. We're almost 60. Unbelievable. I've been talking to a few of the guys who run a LinkedIn Live group, and we're amongst the top 2% on LinkedIn with the number of shows we've done in terms of keeping them going. So I'm quite proud of that, actually. Doesn't mean it's any good, but we've kept going. So last week we had a quite remarkable show, and I think it will stick with me for a long, long time, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But what it did teach me was that sometimes things happen slowly, and the actual show has been my second most successful show ever. So it's been many thousand people watched it. So I'm absolutely tickled pink by that. So thank you very much for those of you who tuned in. I've now had contacts from all over the place, and I'm looking at the roster for next year, and it is really cool. I've got several musicians coming, well-known musicians coming on. I've got some very interesting academics. I've got a couple of artistic people that are working in nature, really. I've got one person who spends all her time taking people around foraging, teaching them the story of the country. So I can't wait to tell you about that, but not for this week. So today, what's today about? Well, it's quite an unusual title today. We called it, it's called Society and Storytelling. And I wondered about this because this is something I've been getting drawn towards in the last few weeks, that there's something about storytelling that we all know, well, at least we all sense, that can change society. And there was a quote from last week from our wonderful guest who talked about restorative storytelling, Marina, and she quoted something which I'm going to play. But before I do that, I'm going to introduce you to my guest this week. Now, my guest this week is a friend of mine. He's been on the show twice before, and his name is the one and only Tom Morley. Tom, welcome back to Artefact Live. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing well.
It's good to see you. Now, we haven't done any rehearsal, have we, Tom?
No.
But I knew that Tom would be a good guest in this, because him and I, this time 2 years ago, Tom, we went to see Tim Minchin together. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And we sat in a pub afterwards, didn't we? And oh gosh, we were, I think it's fair to say we were both pretty blown away by him, weren't we?
Absolutely. I mean, It was it must be one of the top 3 shows seen in my life. And you bought me a ticket. I only found out the other day when I was going to go and see him myself how much those tickets cost.
They're not cheap.
You're a very generous man.
Back in the bad old days. Anyway, but the thing that we both spotted that night, and I should have put it on video. I've got the video, you talking about it somewhere, but the thing that was very clear was he was making really powerful statements about society via the medium of storytelling, whether it was poetry, spoken word, or music. That's what he did all night, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's funny watching that video clip that you sent me of me talking about it afterwards. When I said he told a surprisingly linear story. I don't remember it now, but I think he just said, I did this, and then I did that, and then I did that. And most stories, if you see, most speakers are advised in order to catch the audience is start in the middle of the story.
Yeah.
Like, I was in the jail cell, and I was all alone, and the window slipped back, and the guy said, well, I don't know when you're going to be interviewed. So you go, oh, what? And then you go back, and you'd say, oh, I was just driving down the street. And then you go forward. 2 months later, I still hadn't got my car back. So you do that, but he didn't do that. He could, I mean, talk about disruptive. It's like, I won't use the disruptive format. I'll just do it linear, like like you're told not to do at drama school or writing school or anywhere else. I'll tell you a linear story, but man, am I going to make it interesting?
Absolutely,
he's complete genius.
Now, if anybody doubted why I brought Tom on, he's just proved it. Now, before we go on, Tom, I just want to remind people who are new to the stream what they have to do to really take part in this. If you're tuning in from Facebook, there's a little niggle in the code that means that your name won't come up in the chat if you put your name on. So if you are coming in from Facebook, there's a little piece of code here, just a little line of little website that you need to type into to your browser to allow you to connect to the system that I use, which is called Restream, and it's chat.restream.io/FB, and that'll mean you'll come in as your name rather than Facebook user. And if you are new and you've never been in before, and I know there's some people coming in, but they might be on replay at the weekend, but if you are still, doesn't matter if you're on replay, give us your name and where you're tuning in from, because I really do appreciate seeing where you're all coming in from. So that would be terrific. Now, the first thing, Tom, that I want us to think about, and I want to demonstrate, open a door to a conversation, really. And I don't know if you noticed it because you were late to the game, but I was thinking about one of the motifs that I use a lot when I'm speaking. And one of the motifs I use is actually this. It's a nail going into a piece of wood. And it means, I mean, I don't know if you can remember how I take this, Tom, but I mean, immediately, does that bring anything to mind, or you just went, what's he talking about? I don't know if that means anything to you.
Well, it's funny because I was telling someone yesterday. They said, give me an early experience. Do you mind if I tell you? It does relate.
Go. No, is that why you're here, my friend?
Give me an early experience where you're kind of aware that you made a decision about the world.
Yeah.
And I'm from a working class family, but in those days, if you passed your 11 plus, you got to go to grammar school. So my other brother had been telling me, secondary modern, that he went to. He said, you'll be going there because you're not very clever. And he said, they first years, they pick you upside down, they put your head down the toilet and they flush it. They said, just be aware it's going to be like that for a few weeks. And instead, I passed my 11 plus and I went to the local grammar school. It wasn't local, it was quite a trip. But instead of having my head flushed down the toilet, I got invited to these middle class homes where they'd say, would you like some avocado salad? I didn't know what avocado salad was. And my mate, it'd say, I love salads pretty much for the dressing. And I thought, what, Heinz salad cream? I don't really like it. And then they said, oh no, we make it with a little bit of balsamic and so anyway, so I was at that sort of school, and consequently, when it came to making decisions about what we were going to specialize in, I remember they took it all into the assembly hall. We had no tuition or anything about this, no advice, because they assumed, because we're all middle class, that we'd have discussed it with our parents for some around the dinner table. My mum and dad and everybody, they didn't even know, we had to make that decision. So I just ticked any old box. I said, well, I'll do geography then. Then after about a month of geography, I thought, I hate geography. Well, it's not I hate it, but I don't want to specialize in it. I'd be better off doing woodwork. So this relates to your nail, right? Because that nail has been hit wrong. That's why it's bent. You've got to hit it bang on. And someone's been lazy. They've hit it from the side, or the wood has been it's hit a knot, and the wood's got more resistant as the nail's gone in. So therefore, if you don't hit it bang on, it's not good. It's going to bend because the knot is stronger than the nail. So anyway, so I had a kind of intuition about that sort of stuff.
Yes.
And I thought, I know, I'd be better off doing O-level woodwork than geography. But I thought, how do I get it? Because I had the kind of reputation in the school of being a bit of a rebel. I had this huge afro kind of hair. It was the 60s, late 60s. So I thought, what am I going to do to swing this? And the headmaster, he was all about protocol.
We seem to have lost Tom.
Okay. Do you know what? I should have put the freaking cable in. Anyway, sorry about that. So yeah, so it's all about family. So I know I've got 3 other brothers, right? One of whom went to that school, the eldest.
Yes.
So I said, look, Mr. Gurley, his name was. I said, John is now he's now a furniture seller in Switzerland. He runs this export business. Glenn drives all the furniture in between here and there. Bobby, my brother, restores the furniture if it needs restoring. But what I don't have is someone who can restore it by cutting and nailing and knowing how to put the nail in properly, or screwing if necessary. So so I told this story to him, and he was infuriated inside because he knew that he had to say yes. He didn't want to. He wanted me to go and study geography and have a hard time. But so I told him this story, which he could not refuse. It's like making him an offer he can't refuse. And eventually he said, "Get out, Morley. Go to the woodworks shop."
Excellent.
And of course, I learned how to bang a nail in properly. So.
Yes. Yeah. Good. That's and again, I promise you, everybody, we didn't prepare for this. So that's just Tom riffing on that picture. Let me give you the sort of the reason why I used it for the show, Tom. Mm-hmm. Because it actually is a representation of one of my favourite Stoic sayings. And that Stoic saying is this: it's that opinions are like nails. The harder you hit them, the deeper inside they go. And I remember the first time I heard that, it was only 5 or 6 years ago. I think it was Tim Ferriss I heard talking about this. And I heard it and I was like, gosh, opinions are like nails. The harder, the deeper inside they go. And at the time when I heard it, it was in the middle of the, Trumpistan was appearing, and I'm hearing the media, really going for him. Not the American, media, but the European and the rest of the world media saying this man's an idiot. He's not fit for office, and of course that's right. But I thought at the time, wait a minute. Are we making this idiot into a monster because we keep bashing him? We keep going. And that has really helped me, Tom, since I first heard it, because like a lot of the Stoic writing, I don't know how familiar you are, but I suspect you are familiar with it, but it seems to cut through a lot of the BS. You can really get to a point where you think, yep. There's one that I tried to write one myself. It was listening is like touching at a distance.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same sort of. I know it's a little aphorism, but again, though, it really helps people understand what you're trying to say. And what I'm trying to say there is, I think, and I'm including myself in this. There's no way I'm innocent here, but I think there's a habit in society of bashing.
Yeah.
And the outcome of that habit, things are going to get worse.
Yeah, well, being opinionated is valued.
Yeah.
You know, it's your niche. It's you. I saw this terrible thing. It was an American movie of a guy who was just asking high students stuff out in the yard. You know what? Tell me a couple of capitals of the world, and they'd say sort of Oklahoma. You know, Florida, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so he was laughing and but trying not to. And in so doing, I remember this quite young woman, very pretty young woman, saying, "Well, yeah, but look, I'm confident." I mean, she really said this to the camera. I'm confident. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I got it wrong. I'm confident, and that is what we've created or we've allowed to happen. And it in at art school when Green and I from Scritti Politti were at art school. Jeff Nuttall, who was a great tutor we had, who came out of the Situationist movement, he would say, "Look, you lot, don't be so opinionated. Don't think you have to set your principles in stone. You're young. Look around, to see what." And I've really learned in response to what you're saying. If someone says something to me, like I wrote a piece recently, and everyone was saying it's brilliant, it's brilliant, it's brilliant, and then someone wrote back to me and said this bit isn't clear, and my first response was to say, well, it is clear actually because everybody else loves it, but you know what? I didn't say that because she's a journalist. It was her boyfriend who'd said this bit isn't clear, and I thought, well, I like him. I'll listen.
Yes.
And when I went back to it, I thought, yeah, for some people, that isn't clear. And I want to reach everyone. I don't just want to reach the ones who would say, oh, I know Tom. I know what he means.
Yes.
So I went back and changed it this morning, and I sent it to someone else. So it's version 4, version 3. But that is just an example of I think what you're saying. We get those messages all the time, all of us.
Yes.
I'm not so sure about that. There's a great thing. I don't know if you've seen these T-shirts that are advertised on Facebook and stuff, like English sayings like, well, that isn't exactly what I had in mind. That's what. And underneath in smaller right says, what the bloody hell is this?
Yeah.
So we're so good at kind of going, thanks for your feedback. But what we really think.
I remember one of the in my career, I used to do a lot of when I used to have a proper job, Tom. I used to do a lot of interviewing for British Gas and for other companies, and I used to do what they call the milk rounds, where you go into the universities and you meet all the youngsters. And one of the I guess the markers that I looked out for that would bar them from going through to the next phase was certainty.
Yeah.
And I remember having dialogue with my boss at the time because she wasn't sure. And I said, look, if people are certain after a university career, okay, when you're a teenager, you have that certitude, don't you? You get through that. But when you, after university, if you're lucky enough to go to university, you should be beginning, I think, anyway, to doubt, and say, well, wait a minute, this is complicated, And I still stand by that. And particularly when I hear, people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s speaking with absolute certainty, I despair.
Yeah.
I despair at it because at the end of the day, I mean, I know the way I speak, I'm quite confident and people think, oh, you must know it. But actually underneath it all, often I'm going, shit. But I take pride, in saying, wait a minute, I've changed this bit because I've changed my mind.
Yeah.
And it's part of the scientific, it's part of the scientific training, I know that, but it's not filtered into society, I don't think.
No, it's interesting. We should be talking about school because one thing I remember from history was I think it was Disraeli, our history teacher, saying Disraeli he was fighting for this and he was fighting for that, and then you'll see there's a point in history where he changed policy. And he was asked about that in the House. I see you're not consistent, Mr. Disraeli. And he said, well, do you know what? I've listened to your arguments and I've changed my mind.
Yeah.
And I think if we were taught that, we could just practice it, saying it to the mirror every morning. We don't have to wait until we're standing up in Parliament, but we could practice saying, "Well, I've changed my mind." In the same way that automatically, oh, look at that! Whoa, what, you're so slick. In the same way that young American girl was saying, "I'm confident," you could instead say, "I've changed my mind," and do it, with a different sort of less defensive energy. But hey, you've just made a difference to me. You've expanded me a little. So
no, I like that. And I mean, I remember my old professor saying to me, it wasn't about him, it was about another anatomist who had spent, he was the fella who provided very good evidence that the Turin Shroud was fake, and that there was various paintings in the Louvre that were fake. He was a colour specialist, he was an incredible man, this guy. And he had diagnosed a particular painting. I can't remember what it was now, but it was in a Russian art gallery, and he got it wrong. And then, in fact, one of his methodologies was shown to be wrong, and he'd won a Nobel Prize for the work that he did. And before he died, a lot of that work was shown to be wrong. And he said, I never heard him say it, but my professor was with him when he said it. He said, that was the proudest moment in my career, when I was shown to be wrong.
Wow.
Now that takes some commitment to what I would call progress, commitment to progress, because he won a Nobel Prize, for God's sake, and it was wrong.
But it shows he was at the forefront of it. That's all we can ever be. We can only ever be in the vanguard, and he was probably proud of that. I don't know what was going on in his mind, but
yes. There's a comment here from Derek Cheshire. Hello, Derek. Thanks for joining us from LinkedIn. I definitely agree about certainty. It goes hand in hand with an inability to cope with ambiguity.
Yeah. And who can be certain now? This year, the last couple of years, it's I'm reminded of that thing. I mean, it's probably a meme all over the place. Things have never been this fast, and they'll never be this slow again.
I use it myself.
We are moving at ridiculous speed.
Yes.
We were playing like this. Here we go.
Yes.
Yay!
Dead easy. Yeah.
2019. Yay! 2020. 2021. And 2022 is going to be all over the bleeding kit. I was just watching your Artifact Live. It's got a rhythm. Artifact Live. And if you funk it up a bit. So that's what we're going to have. Lots of funked up Artifact Live, I think. Episode 56. Is that right? Are you on 56?
56.
57.
Amazing.
I hope you can do the Heinz soup can for that.
Wow. I've got an idea about next week. I'll tell you about it later.
Google. Go in the Google images, right? And look up the number 57. Put in the number 50. You'll get a nice range.
We'll have fun with that.
Not that I know anything about design. I'm just a drummer. Just the drummer.
Just the drummer.
Yeah.
Dear. Right, we'll talk about that in the pub next time I see you. I think we're planning a Guinness in Paddington, aren't we?
Indeed.
Yeah. So there's a story I've got that takes this and adds to this, because I had an experience that I don't tell this story very often, Tom. I don't think you've heard me tell this story before, but I was working with the Third Sea Lord, head of the Navy, and I was working with his leadership team, and I did that for 9 months in I think it was in Abbeywood, one of the big bases for the administration, if you like, of the military. And we had there was a large population of them. It's a huge operation. I mean, these platforms, these boats are massive, and there's hundreds of people involved in each boat. And I had I sort of ran a 5-day event with colleagues for the sort of the junior leaders, and then I ran a week-long event for just the board. And there was all sorts of things happen, but there was one moment that it honestly gave me goosebumps. I had asked the group, and this was the senior leaders, to describe to, if you like, a layman what they did for a living. Right? Now I'm in there, someone who used to march, CND marches, someone who, to this day, I actually think nuclear weapons are a bigger threat than climate change. And I know that's, some people think that's contentious. If you know the evidence, it's not. It is seriously, seriously serious, and it's gone off the radar. It's been pushed off because of other things, other important things, but it's been pushed off. But I asked them all to go into a room on their own. There was 12 of them, and I asked them to draw what they did for a living. And there was one guy called John, and John was a fairly old, like he looked like an old sea dog, the white beard and he's a classic boatsman, as they call him, submariner. And he came back in, and he was second last to present. And I've actually got the picture. This is what he drew. Ignore the blue. That was just me categorizing the different groups. But this is what he drew. So he felt, well, what do you see, Tom? What do you see?
Well, I would just say life's in a balance with, and it's up to us to support.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what I would say, given if I'm given any influence over this picture, I would say it's up to me to support it going the right way.
Yeah, and that's basically what he said. He felt that his job was to maintain the peace, using these horrific weapons. Now, we don't need to talk about that. We can talk about it if you like, but I mean, I fundamentally disagree with that. But nevertheless, I was extremely grateful that this guy, who happened to be the guy who turned the key, that's how important he was. And that's how he saw his job.
Yeah. Well, you want someone like him in charge.
You don't want a Tony Robbins, do you? Going, bah, 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 you want somebody like him, because to me, it really, again, told an important story, because, and I'm not pretending then, because that was 15 years ago, right? Back then, did I see that as significant as I do now? No, I didn't. I thought it was like, wow, at the time. I remember thinking, my goodness, because I was only in my 30s, and I'm going, I was clueless. I was a consultant, I was all over the place. But looking back in it, I do, like you, my reaction now is, thank goodness that old salty, dog was the guy with the finger on the pulse, because if it had been another character, and some of the characters we have in government today, you imagine them being in charge of that. So
you don't want Peppa Pig with their
no.
With their, it's not even. I was going to put finger on a button. It's not a finger, is it?
No,
it's a hoof. Yeah.
But wasn't that a carry on? Wasn't that a carry on?
I mean, the man's a fool. I mean, but the thing is that all these colleagues knew that, but they knew he'd get them in. He'd, I won't use the words "get Brexit done" because it wasn't done. It was fudged, and it was always going to be fudged because it was just some impossible dream. But they knew that he would get them their jobs, be able to stay and work for a bit. That's all. That's all he's there for. And he must have known. Yeah, I'm sure he's savvy enough to know that the Tories just stabbed the leader in the back eventually. So he'll feel it coming now. His wife will be getting him to put on a stab-proof vest.
Yes, and it can happen to Thatcher. It can happen to anybody.
He can leave his front exposed because the Tories never stab anyone in the heart. It's too visible.
Yeah.
But he'd better be wearing something on his back because it's coming now.
You can see it, you can smell it, can you?
Yeah, but the awful thing about that story is it'll be good to see him gone, but man, who are we going to get next?
Who are we going to get in place? Yeah,
I think Rishi. Rishi's been, as far as his story goes, and his storytelling, he's been setting himself up from day one with his branding, with his and who wants? How can a multimillionaire know what the people need?
Absolutely right.
It's a bizarre It's a bizarre thing. It's like just before we came on there, we're talking about news templates and how they don't. It's like education. All these templates we live by, and in Script Politically, we used to do a song called Hegemony, which means you don't need. Look at him, he's so slick. You don't need, you don't need guns, you don't need sticks, you don't need repressive laws so much, because the people just do what you want them to do out of common sense. You call it common sense. So it's common sense that we only see 1 minute of news per item or something like that. We could have, this is the news. It's good. We're extending the news to half an hour. It means it's so important. We're not going to be showing EastEnders. We could do that. We could have a kind of smorgasbord of TV. Oh my God, can you see what's happening to girls now? They can't go to school in Afghanistan. We're going to do the whole day on that and about education and women. So we could live like that, but instead we just have girls don't seem to be going to school anymore in Afghanistan. Anyway, over to the weather. So I don't know where we started with this, but it was the trotter.
Well, I think the point of all of this, that
I tell you, Scott, you should think of taking this up seriously. You are so good, and because if you're doing what a TV producer would have, 4 people doing. Get me Hegemony, Script Politically. I know no one's ever heard of them, So, but you're just doing it all yourself.
Well, I think the needs must, my friend, because and it's nice of you to say that, and it means a lot for you, somebody like you saying that to me. But the issue there is that I think everybody can do this. I don't think it's that difficult. I just think we have a fear of doing it, and I think and I will be telling that story. I've been asked to speak at a few events about it actually, which is really weird. But yeah, it's just learning to drive. That's all it is. But I'll tell you what I wanted to do. I'll pause you making a racket in the background here, and what I'll do is I'm going to ask you to watch with me something. I'm not going to put it off, but we're both still going to be on camera. And this was a piece that Mariana mentioned last week. It's really short. It's a quote basically, and I wondered what you thought of this. I think you can probably tell from my body language what I thought about it, so I'm giving it away a wee bit, but listen to this with me.
I don't know if you've heard this one. It's by Ben Okri, the poet. And he said that stories are the secret reservoir of values. Change the stories that individuals and nations live by and tell themselves, and you will change the individuals and nations.
Yeah, exactly. I watched all of her.
Oh, did you?
Talk with you, and it really moved me. And I'll come back to that point in a minute. But I tell you what moved me was she wasn't selling anything. She was just having a conversation with you because she thought that would be the valuable use of an hour. It's time well spent. You often talk about time well spent. I think she just thought this will be time well spent, and she wasn't promoting a book. She wasn't promoting a course. Everything she talked about, she just said, "That's what I do over there." It's good to be chatting to you, Scott. About this. So about that point, well, it's exactly hegemony. Yeah. The stories we live by, be they the stories we are told in childhood, about if you do this, this will happen. If you do this bad thing, you'll get these consequences. We've got to change my wife is a storyteller, so Dawn gathers stories from all over the world. A bit like Joseph Campbell, and says, do you see how this story that they tell in this culture is actually the same story that they tell in this culture, but because in that culture they have a volcano. Do you notice how the power is all the unstable power is all about the volcano, and yet over here where they only have grasslands, it's all about the weather and whether the weather's coming. That's where the power is, because it comes that way. So we need new stories now, about our culture now, but we need to base them on like music we already have in our culture, stories we already have, land aspects of the landscape that we already have.
Yes.
The tragedy of and the banality of Brexit and the arguments around it were it was a kind of double think thing. We're really proud of our culture, but you know what? We don't know fuck all about our culture.
Yes.
All those people, excuse my language, but really, in the same way that Boris waves the flag. I mean that he shouldn't even be allowed to touch the flag.
No.
The guy is destroying all the good stuff about British culture.
Yeah. But why? This is the nub of this, and this is why I wanted to do this show with you, Tom. I don't see, like, I'll give you a very banal example, right? I talk about time, right? You've seen me talking about time, right? I'm always talking about time. I'm obsessed with time, right? And one of the things that I try to do is to help people understand time. Now, you would think everybody would understand it, but they really don't. And when there's one line, people talk about a million years. And I ask people, what does that mean to you? And of course, they've got no idea. So what I say is this, I say, right, how long would it take you to count to 1 million? This is from I nicked this from Carl Sagan. He did it with pencils. But, how long would it take you to count to 1 million? It's 2.5 sodden weeks to count to 1 million. So if you're just going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it would take you 2.5 weeks. Now that lands. It's not I never come up with that. It's nicked from Carl Sagan and from others. It lands. And what worries me, even from, politically, I used to sell Socialist Worker. I used to be I was in the militant group and all the rest of it. But now I think there's a loony left and an even loonier right. And I've had enough of both of them, And and my head now is going towards, we need a new type of politics. We need to, for example, I think the whip is a really dangerous thing. It's done well to get us to a point, and I'm not, it's like, I'm not into this revisionism either. The whip was important to get us to a certain point. Does it serve purpose anymore? I don't believe it does, because it basically says, and I'll speak Glaswegian for a minute, you'll do what you're told. You'll do what you're told. And no. I want politicians and I want business people and I want, to say, fuck off. It's a bit like, in the Australian Parliament. Do you ever watched it? It's great television. Do you ever watched it? It's about 1983 in Australia just now, right? And they stand up and they go, the honourable gentleman's an absolute asshole. Accents. They're really like that. They say what they think.
Yeah.
And I know all this British sort of, a bit like what you discussed earlier.
Yeah.
There's parts of that have been important. There are parts of that. Britain was the hub of the world for a good 120 years. It did a lot of good, did a lot of bad, but it did a lot of good. And I don't believe in revisionism of that. You've got to say, okay, there was good and there was bad. But I don't see that in Parliament, and I don't see that in the newspapers, and I don't see that, in all the issues that are current at the moment. A lot of it's bullshit, and nobody's shouting it out because they're either too scared to speak, and they get accused of being a racist, or they get accused of something else. I don't know what the hell. There's plenty of things to get accused of these days. To get deplatformed, but even that, challenge it. Who's been deplatformed?
Sure. But I think what you're talking about is basic fear. It's almost like, and it's really low level. It's almost kind of insect like. I feel threatened. I'll defend myself by attacking or hiding or not making any dangerous moves. Or it's really, really low level. When you're talking about time, there's certain things that you do in the music business, or you're kind of offered, where what can I say? It's a bit like going to the pub, but different. And you ingest certain chemicals, where you experience time not in a linear way, as these scared people do, who are thinking that was my past, this is my present, I've got to look after my future. You just experience time as, all right, it's just now. That's all it is. I mean, we only ever have the present moment anyway. Whether you're philosophical or you follow this or that or that or that or that, we only ever have the present moment. But if you can experience that on a moment by moment level, then actually your career, your imagined political career in 10 years' time doesn't mean anything. You just think, well, what's the right thing to do right now?
Yes.
Oh, what's the right thing to do right now? And then you think, oh, I'm actually having quite a good life,
Yes, absolutely.
Right now. Do the right thing. It's almost like AA or any of those things where they say just for today. Wouldn't it be great if you had kind of AA meetings where you've been just a complete kind of mercenary bastard all your life, the MB. I'm going to an MB meeting, and then you just say, just for today, I'm going to do the right thing. I might be a complete bastard again tomorrow, but just for today, will anyone support Tom to do the right thing? Yeah, all right, I'll do it. I did it once, So wouldn't that be great if we just did that? And we could do it without any. Okay, everybody, we've got to change all the structures. We could do it all within the structure. The Tories could even say, I know I've been a complete, I'm going to close down my offshore. I'm going to bring my money back. And just for today, I'm going to bring all my money back and I'm going to pay the right amount of tax.
Yes.
And all the civil servants, we let Starbucks off. Do you know what? Just for today, let's collect it. All these things, we don't have to change anything but behavior. If people 5% did 5% more of the right thing every day, we'd be sorted out. But instead, we're set up to compete. Oh no, that's the hegemony that we're stuck in. We're stuck in fear. If I'm not a bastard, I won't win. Sorry.
Can I maybe? I have a proposal, sir. I think there is some quite bright lights, but they're in the distance. Yeah, they're like a faraway star, but they're there. And one of those things, and it surprises even me when I say it, but one of those things is technology, because it doesn't take a huge stretch of the imagination. It really doesn't, to say, okay, what we don't want is what we've currently got extending. So, I mean, one of my favourite books, it's called The Machine Stops. It was written in 1909, and it's about how we all end up living in little pods, communicating with the rest of the world through technology. That's ultimately where we're going if we keep going in a linear way. And we're back to that time thing and the linear movement of things again. However, there's another way of thinking about it, that technology could help us change things, because I know that a lot of people, with our background, and I literally do say this, and I believe this. I think people are the answer, love is the answer, all that sort of stuff. But that's not going to change everybody. We've known for decades that won't change everybody. You'll get a little movement. You can sometimes get change coming from little movements. There's some evidence that happens, but I think technology is one of the answers, because what could technology, if you stretch your brain for a minute, Tom, I don't know if you've ever heard me talk about this, but I think we're on the precipice of start-up communities, start-up countries, start-up welfare, because we always talk about start-up companies, but if I start, and I'm just being hypothetical, if I start a successful vlog, right, say for a miracle happened and my live show went really popular and I had millions of followers, bit like, Rogan and all these other guys that are doing really well, they're bigger now than a lot of countries. That's a fact. They're bigger now than they have more influence than governments on certain individuals. I think locally, things like Nextdoor and all that other technology that's around, I think if people can come together enough, we can start to mobilise. And the technology means that you don't need to live in my village. We create our own villages. We create our own country. Countries are completely arbitrary. I mean, you don't walk outside and go towards Cardiff and trip over a border. Maybe some people would like that in Wales, and maybe some people in Scotland would like that in the border, but you don't. It's all just made up nonsense. It's all subjective. So let's change the objects. Let's change it. And I think technology and Bitcoin, the cryptocurrencies, I don't know if you know anything about that, but that can be part of the argument. But of course, they're not very good for the environment. So, it's a quandary at the moment. But I'm quite excited about that because there's not a lot of folk thinking like that. They're all talking about, changing the current system. Just smash the current system. Because now's the time, for the first time in history, I think, that we can actually do that. And we've got technology that can help us achieve that, Tom. You've come across that stuff. But I think the idea of start-up communities, saying that, we don't accept the council. We don't want them. Bunch of, around where I live, my God, why anybody would vote for them. They're a bunch of stuck-up, useless so-and-sos. And all they're doing is building houses everywhere, crowding the roads, destroying the environment. But the people locally don't vote them out.
Yeah.
That really worries me, and I think, what the hell are you doing? And people say, well, you should get involved. I do get involved, but it doesn't matter. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story about that. Is that we lived next to Scion Park here in Isleworth, West London.
Yeah.
Scion House is up the road, big, huge sort of estate, run by the Duke of Northumberland, who's named Earl Percy. Now there's an allotment nearby.
I've seen you posting pictures of it.
Yeah. So the allotment, he said, I need to maintain. He's one of the richest people, right, in the UK.
Yeah.
Earl Percy. We were out on the streets. Earl Percy, give us mercy. We're. I was keeping the groove to that on my snare drum out in the streets. Anyway, he didn't listen, and he said, "No, I'm going to build because I need the money to maintain my house, my big house. I'm going to build flats, but I'm going to leave 1/3 of it as allotments, so you'll all have small allotments, And we knew, and anyway, he spun this story. There's a hospital up the road. I'll make the flats affordable for nurses. We all know. If you looked at the plans, they're all luxury flats, right?
Yeah.
So we were out on the streets protesting, all sorts of things. And one of the councillors is great. He's really good councillor, Labour councillor. At one of the meetings, he said, well, if it's your land, show us the receipt. Because actually it wasn't his land, it was common land, for 100 years. Anyway, but he still had some power over it. However, to your point, he has a lot of interests up north in Northumberland, where he's Duke. And the story got up there because this particular Labour councillor used to be an investigative journalist. So he got the story out to his friends. And Lord Percy eventually dropped his idea to build on the allotments, but it wasn't that he had any compassion in his heart, or he listened to any of the arguments about nature and what it did for families to be able to go there and everything. But he started to get some bad press up north, where he had bigger property interests. So he knew this wasn't going to go away. So to your point, I think we have some power, but it was always within his power because he had the money to just go, who cares? Bit of bad press, a few rotten tweets for a couple of months, then it'll all blow over. However, I think he was advised. It was certainly nothing to do with his heart. But I think you're talking about a way of kind of getting what we want through. Shaming is the wrong word. I think it's exposing injustice, or lack of. Now we can say lack of care for the environment because it is a great piece of green space. And so there's all sorts of things. But when you say we can smash we can't smash the system. The system is very, very resistant. I'll tell you one story that I heard from Jamie Wheel, who he said he heard this conference where all the several billionaires hired this top futurist to come and speak, they got this big hall, and the futurists turned up, and he said, well, when are all the people coming in? And they said, oh no, but there's no people, it's just us. We want you to tell us about the future. So he outlined this futures, right? He outlined things about climate change and what would have to change and how they could spend their money. Eventually they said, the question we really want to ask, because we've built our bunkers, we've got our survival plan. Yeah, exactly. Jamie Wheal, lovely guy. I've worked with him quite a lot now. They said the question we really want to ask is, when the event happens, and he said, what's the event? And they said, well, it could be climate change, it could be nuclear war, it could be revolution. But anyway, when the event happened, to them it was all manageable, whatever it was, because they got a bunker. When the event happens, how do we maintain our security force without them turning against us? Should we get neck tags that give them electric shocks? Should we have force fields that mean they can't get into the food store to go and feed their families? I'm not quoting them word for word here, but those were the sorts of questions they wanted to answer. Now, if this is a kind of private conversation going on way up where all the money is, where all the billionaires are. And we all know, so, because we've done, the people have done the sums, we could still have the same amount of billionaires in the world if we ask them nicely to give us some of their billions to spend on whatever we need to spend, be it national health, be it looking after older people, be it looking after children who come as asylum seekers and their parents drown in the Channel, and all those things. We could, the billionaires could still be billionaires. So it's so we know there is no feeling, there's no compassion, there's no strategy for how we will survive. There is a strategy for how they will survive and their families. That is the world we are living in. And so I think you're right. I think we have to fight the power in whatever way we can. But it's not going to be reasonable. It's not going to be within a template that the news can just report. Billionaires, some billionaires have given some of their billions away. Therefore, these children don't have to live in grotty seaside hotels anymore when they land. So it could all be fixed if they give me the keys to number 10 for a week. I have my team in place. We could do it within a week. All that corporation tax that hasn't been paid, legitimately, that we can collect legitimately. They're meant to be paying it, but they're getting away with it. We could fix everything. All that money.
It does. I think is it partly because, I mean, this is a counter argument, but I think part of the problem is that a lot of people, and I'm not including you in this, but a lot of people don't want to help the community. They just hate the rich. And I also think that's something else that has to be smashed, because there's a lot of good people that are rich. Just because you've got money doesn't make you a bad person. And if you look at, I mean, one of the things that my youngest kids are both YouTube fanatics, and they watch, the YouTube channels, and some of these YouTubers, and I can't even tell you what they're called, they're multi-millionaires. There's one guy gives half of all the money he makes to charity, and it's hundreds of millions. Hundreds of millions. And that has been transformative for where he is in America. So I do think that even, and I do agree with what you've just said, but I do think there is a demonization of the rich, but with people who, I mean, I remember there was, we need to watch the time here. I've got a question I want to ask you, but a couple of weeks ago, I had our colleague Madeline on. Now, Madeline, I don't know if you've seen Madeline speak.
Yeah.
And I worry about, and I said that, you heard me say it, I think, on air, and I said to Madeline, is this good for you? And she gave me an answer, and it was a good answer, and it was, post-traumatic growth and all the rest of it. But one of the things that really stuck with me, she said, And you mentioned it earlier, actually. We're creating a shaming culture, and nothing good ever comes from shame.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a difference between pointing out injustice, and pointing out shame, because injustice you can measure against a set of codes of conduct, be they written in law or just kind of, this is how humanity.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Totally agree.
Shaming is more. I think she was talking in terms of shaming the victim.
She was,
and the way she shamed herself, thinking, I brought this upon myself, which is that's a very different thing. And
the point I'm making, Tom, is I think a lot of people who perhaps stand next to us are actually trying to shame people. That's the point I'm trying to make. You're right about, of course, you're right about injustice. I mean, Amazon, criminal. It's absolutely criminal the way they pay less tax than I do. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous. And that does require, serious investigation. And the governments, not just the Tory government, the governments have never sorted that out. That's not new.
Well, do you know what?
Decades.
All right, I just want to pick you up on something there. It doesn't need investigation. It just needs to collect the money. That's what it needs. We don't need to review it.
Fair point. No, I get that. No, you're right.
Right, by 5 o'clock today, we need to have collected that money.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Investigation's over.
Yeah,
and one other thing I wanted to say about the rich. I don't hate the rich and love the poor. A lot of the poor really annoy me.
Yeah,
but there was I saw this by a woman, a facilitator. It was great. She was inspiring people all around the world. She said, yeah, I'll inspire you. Yeah, it's great you're doing my work. But please don't write to me and ask if we can meet for coffee. I'm really not interested. And that's great. She was very authentic about it. She's
yeah.
And I think we haven't got time. We haven't got time. Let's just do. Inspire thousands of people at a time. Yeah, that's what I want to do. But the questions that social media come up and these freaking polls that keep coming up on LinkedIn. Are you the person who likes to take time off, or are you ready for burnout? I always write, if ever anybody asks me any of those things, I say, well, do you know what? False dichotomies really bore me, and they've become part of the way we speak to each other. Would you rather this or that? I mean, it's a sales technique. Which is better for you for us to talk again, Wednesday or Friday? I never want to talk to you again. Actually, is that in your script? No, it just says Wednesday or Friday. And I go, well, let me tell you, mate, it's a false dichotomy. So.
Yes. That's the subject for a whole other show. Because that is the sort of false binary debates that are all over the place. That are useless debates everywhere. And again, it's back to the point about where I'm getting with politics. I've had enough. I've just had enough of them, and it's both of them, and it's the in-betweenies that I'm interested in now. The guys who are trying to step across the whip. That's a funny metaphor, isn't it?
Well,
Can I ask you? Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
One last question, and this is a question I now ask everybody on my show. But I mean, you've been on twice before, but I've never asked you it. So I wanted to ask you it.
Is it
what's your favourite story, Tom? Whether a book, a film, a piece of music, anything. What's your favourite?
Wow, you sprung that on me, didn't you?
I did.
Well, I think it would have to be The Hero's Journey, because it's so, and that of course is a number of stories, but it's the basic structure of Lord of the Rings, the basic structure of Star Wars. So The Hero's Journey, and the reason I like it is because, and you'll see this in anything, you'll see it in rom-coms, you'll see it in adventure movies. There is, at the beginning, there's normal life. Nearly all stories start with a description of normal life. All right, I know where I am, I know who the characters are. And then there's an interruption. Now, in The Hero's Journey, yeah, exactly. So The Hero's Journey, it's a call to adventure. if you go a little bit to the right, first thing, you get the call to adventure. Now, something that's missed out on this particular diagram is the refusal of the call. Between crossing the threshold, there is generally a refusal of the call. So when Gandalf says to Frodo, here's the ring, go and get rid of it with you. Frodo's, oh, no, I don't think I'm really the man for this, Gandalf. Can't you do it? You know, so there's the refusal of the call. And we are constantly, I mean, the rest of that circle is interesting in whatever permutation you see. If people are watching it, if you go to Google Images and type in the hero's journey, you'll get all sorts of depictions.
Hundreds of them
that Scott's just showed you. That the refusal of the call, in order to have the story, we have to answer the call, and then we cross the threshold. Then we gather allies, like the allies gathered in Rivendell.
Yeah.
And we go, why do we want a dwarf, you know, with a freaking axe? This is, you know, we've got to be stealthy. Well, it might be useful. You know, why have we got this elf who looks like a leaf? You know, he won't be any good in a battle. Well, I might be useful. So you gather all these allies, not knowing how they're going to be useful to the story, but you gather them anyway. And that is the reason it's my favorite story, is that anybody I know in the arts or music, or like yourself in what you're doing in business and especially online, you did this, you set out on the hero's journey. You said, well, I don't know, how come if I hit this button, I'm not live for 60 seconds? Or how come it's come on LinkedIn, but it hasn't come on Facebook? Or how come? So all that, you have to cross that threshold. And there's a point in the Lord of the Rings where I think they actually show it on the ground. They show their feet, and they say, do you know what? We're not in the Shire anymore, and or we're not in Texas anymore. Whatever it is, you know. But that is really significant, and I suppose actually, now I'm thinking of it, now you've asked me, that is what I do all the time. I facilitate people, say, I understand your normal life. I understand exactly where you are. I'm going to invite you, and of course they say no, and then I go. And sometimes I say to them, as I said to a group the other day, I was a bit reluctant. They were a bit reluctant on site. I said, look, you have to realize that Jessica over there, she's booked me for this hour. We're 5 minutes into the hour, and I'm not leaving because I've put my invoice in already. I've been paid. So it's up to you how you want to spend the next 55 minutes. And that, for some of them, the humor of it, or the candid, or the whatever, they get on board. So they cross the threshold. And then over the other side, as soon as you cross the threshold, there's an energy that comes, and you think, oh my God, why didn't anyone tell me it was like this? You know, and then they get excited. Right. Oh, what, are you coming as well? Are you coming? Oh, this is going to be fun. So, yeah.
Very good. Thanks, Tom. That's fantastic. I mean, it's to just build a tiny little bit on it. It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because just so happens that my guest next week is Jo Berry, and she's going to be talking about war. And she came on, I don't know if you know Jo's story, but her father was Sir Anthony Berry, who was killed in the Grand Hotel in Brighton by the IRA back in 1984.
Yeah, no.
So she has been through, a horrific journey, and she is now friends with Patrick McGee, the guy who killed her father.
Wow.
So it's absolutely a wonderful thing to mention, and I really appreciate you mentioning it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. If there was anywhere that people could see your work, where would you like them to look? What's your preferred way of people seeing what you do?
See my name in the corner down here.
Yeah.
Tom Morley. If you add .com on the end of that, and go to the contacts page. It's got Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. I don't use Twitter much, but Instagram, Insta, I believe one has to call it.
That's the current. Put down with the kids there, Tom.
Yeah, that's right. Meta. I invented Meta. Listen, look, Facebook. Facebook. Oh, hang on, it's gone
Oh, he's
off.
off again.
Let me just play your Facebook, Instagram. It's turned itself off. That's right. That's Facebook, Instagram, right? It's quite fun.
Yeah.
Facebook, Instagram, Facebook, Meta. That's it. Meta. It's not very funky, is it?
No, excellent.
I mean, he'll get away with it.
Of course he will.
I always think now, I don't think Trump's coming back. So I didn't put this out when Trump was around, but Trump didn't understand the difference between 4-4 and 6-8. If you want to get a chant going, because he's built a wall, right?
Yes.
All these people build a wall, build a wall, build a. You can't sustain it. It's not interesting. But if he'd done it in 6-8, right? Build a wall, build a wall, build a wall. He'd have had his wall built by now. But instead it was build a wall, build a wall. I'm bored. I'm going home. I'm not giving you any money. Yeah. Build a wall. Right. I'll give you my life savings. I mean, these people, they know nothing. Nothing.
Tom, you've been wonderfully entertaining as well as wonderfully wise, as you always are. This will not be the last time we're on this show together. Thank you very much for spending an hour with me and my audience. It's been brilliant, as always. And I cannot wait to have that pint with you, my friend.
Yeah. Oh.
So thank you, Tom.
All right. Take care.
So I hope I'm hurt. My face is hurting because I've been smiling so much. I hope you appreciated that as much as I did. I know we probably stepped over lines that you're not supposed to step over. I don't care. We need to do more of that. I would like to see more people having, dialogue, swearing, becoming authentic, being real. And so thank you, Tom, for that. That was wonderful. The next week, we're returning to a topic that I never thought I'd talk about. I never thought I'd, take in so much about it. But that topic is trauma. I've already got a trilogy of shows about trauma. But next week, we've got Jo Berry, as I mentioned to Tom earlier, coming on to talk about her work, which is, I think, phenomenal. So I really hope that you can come along and join us next week, because it's going to be a humdinger. And I don't know where to start with the one next week. So anyway, so I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for all of you who have tuned in, my new friends from the LinkedIn streaming group. That's fantastic. I really appreciate you coming in, and I look forward to watching your streams as well in the near future. So once again, my name is Scott MacArthur, and this has been ARTEFACTLive, the art and science of storytelling.